Anyway, what else have we got going on?
Silent Twins, which is a film about... Do you know the story of June and Jennifer Gibbons?
I do not.
Okay, well, it has been told many times before, both in documentaries and in dramas and in stage productions and famously in a book. So the recap would be that they're twins, born in 1963, Barbadian British children in Wales who were ostracised at school and bullied at school and found themselves talking only to each other increasingly in these kind of whispered tones, almost in a language that nobody else really understood. So they led a very, very insular life. And they retreat into their own private world. In real life, they retreated into their own private world before being dragged into the spotlight after they were arrested as adolescents, as teenagers, because of acts of vandalism and theft and arson. And they ended up in Broadmoor, and they were in Broadmoor for over a decade. Whilst they were there, they were interviewed by the Sunday Times journalist Marjorie Wallace, who wrote the book upon which this is based. I think also the stage adaptation play was based on her book as well. And uncovered this tranche of writing that they had done, because it turned out that when they were on their own together, they dreamed of being authors. They wrote poems, they wrote plays, they did puppet shows, and they had this incredible creative private world. Here is a scene from the film which stars Tamara Lawrence and Letitia Wright, who both won Best Joint Lead at the Biffers. This is of the two twins receiving a package in the post, which includes the typewriter on which they are going to write their masterpieces.
That's
a typewriter, an old-fashioned typewriter. This is directed by Agnieszka Smoczynska, who is a Polish filmmaker. This is a British-Polish co-production, and please forgive my terrible pronunciations. You will have heard her name before because she directed a film in 2015 called The Lure, which was described recently when it turned up in the BFI horror season, which is called In Dreams of Monsters, which is a very good horror season. It was described as a Polish new wave mermaid horror musical, which is one of the best descriptions of a film, Evs. And what they do here is that they take the writings and the creations that the girls made, and they use these to inform a series of dream and fantasy sequences that cut in and out with, in inverted commas, reality. And in order to dramatize them, they use animation, they use musical sequences and songs, they use dance. The whole thing is a kind of like a very inventive, surreal collage. And I think that is a very adventurous way to go with this story, because if you think of Peter Jackson's Heavenly Creatures, in which you have, those two young women who had this rich fantasy world, which Jackson then puts on screen, these large characters and this fantastical, goings on. But it seems as real and as physical as everything that's happening in their real world. And I think there is a connection to that. I also think at times this put me in mind of, do you remember that film Notes on Blindness, which was, I talked about it, but it was...
Yes, I do remember.
And it was a kind of docudrama in which what they did was they used lip-synced recordings, real life recordings, but they dramatized them. And it did this weird thing about drawing attention to the performance, but in a way that was oddly kind of immersive. And then again, I was also thinking about Dead Ringers, the David Cronenberg movie in which Jeremy Irons plays both Beverly and Elliot Mantle, and yet the characters are differentiated, even though they are actually both played by the same actor, and they look exactly the same, but they don't, because it's to do with the way in which their physicality is slightly different. I think that Letitia Wright and Tamara Lawrence are really brilliant in this. I think they're great performances because they are mirror images, but they're also distinct. I think the way in which the film sort of vacillates between what really happened and what's happening in their imaginative worlds is really well done. I think the film is slightly impenetrable, and I don't think it's going to find a very wide audience, although there is an argument that because the relationship that the twins had was so insular, and it was often described by people as impenetrable, people could not get into their world. It's kind of almost inevitable and perhaps appropriate that the film itself might be slightly impenetrable. But I've said it before and I'll say it again. I would always rather a film aimed higher and faltered than just played it straight. And I think this story, if you're going to tell it again, it needs to be done in a way that is extraordinary. And I think it is extraordinary. I think it's flawed. I think it doesn't entirely work. But I think that when it does, the things that work about it are all to do with its adventurousness. And as I said, British Independent Film Awards, Best Joint Lead Performance for Tamara Lawrence and Letitia Wright, and that is exactly right.
Well, now, that was a great video, I thought, wasn't
Couldn't
it?
take my eyes off it.
And neither could they.
Do you think they know that they can keep up to date with all things Kermode and Mayo's take by checking out our social channels?
Well, they do now.
Yes, they do.